Hi, I'm Josh Curving, and welcome to another Death Battle prediction video. But first, Joker versus Sweet Tooth, or as I currently like to call it, probably the most plot-oriented fight we've had. While I did admittedly gloss over quite a few things in my prediction video for Joker versus Sweet Tooth, largely because I actually was recording it before work, so it was in a bit more of a rush. One of the biggest things with the fight that a lot of people agreed on was that when Sweet Tooth was in his truck, there was no feasible way he would lose, which even Death Battle admitted. So then the whole fight became, well, how do we get him out of the truck? And then they simply wrote the episode around that. So they ultimately ended up going with the one and only way for Joker to win, which is even unlikely to work, given that, one, it would require him to actually come out thinking that that's his method to get out of this, which wouldn't necessarily happen before a lethal attack happened. Two, it would require Sweet Tooth not simply killing him while he's in the middle of his spiel. Three, it would require Joker to actually know a lot of things about Sweet Tooth, which is extremely unlikely. And they also really overplayed Sweet Tooth being an idiot in this. He's actually not an idiot. He's a pretty smart guy. Ultimately, I don't really care because I have so little stakes in either one of these characters. But I just really didn't like how they went about this episode, really. It just felt way too plot-oriented. They just went with... I don't know, they went against what they've done a lot of the time. And there's really no other fight in which the person would pretty much be able to win by asking nicely. Yeah, there's not really too much else to talk. Oh, yes, actually, there's one thing. With the Titan Joker, that was actually a fake out on the animation team's part. Because when this episode was announced, the other animator, the one who has animated one of the DBXs, he tweeted a picture, and on that screen was Titan Joker, which actually made everyone think that they were using Titan Joker, which they ultimately ended up not doing. I don't know if it was cut later, but they potentially faked us out, which makes me weirded out because then it makes me unsure if I can trust the tweets that are coming out about future battles and stuff. Well, that was a humbling experience from the animator, so... another good thing is that the Joker's voice was actually very good. I was a little bit curious what they were going to go with in terms of how they present the Joker, and they ultimately ended up going with like a Mark Hamill kind of thing, and I think Mark Hamill's the best Joker, so can't go wrong there. Also, that smack with a telephone pole should have totally decapitated Joker with no real issues. Anyway, Shadow versus Mewtwo. We're bringing back Shadow for another fight. And the comparison of stats is weird a little bit. Because, okay, let's get into this first. So, with Shadow, we have... I'm going to go into first base stats, then super form stats. So Shadow with his base is city level, scaling from Sonic As of Adventure 1, I think? Yeah, 1. Because in that one, he fought Perfect Chaos, and there's a city level feat in there. And more or less, Shadow does scale to that. Because it takes place in Adventure 1. In super form, he maybe scales to planet level because of a feat that Dark Gaia did. But one of the things with that is that he didn't fight Dark Gaia. and ultimately this kind of goes into where the speed comes in, but bear with me, Sonic fans. I don't think Shadow can scale to Sonic all that much. As of, at the very least, everything after Sonic Adventure 2. In Sonic Adventure 2, base Shadow and base Sonic were portrayed as equal. So, yes, you can say that as of right there, with Sonic's stats in Adventure 1... Get the cameras back in focus. With the stats as of Adventure 1, then they would be even. Oh, it does not want to focus. Okay, there we go. As of everything beyond that, though, you get into where Sonic isn't taking people seriously. He's beating a lot of things on his own, and even when he's not beating things on his own, it's obvious he really could have. As well, in the games, Shadow has only actually gone super like 3 times. So what I don't understand is why a lot of people are saying that Super Shadow scales 1-to-1, as in every feat that Super Sonic has, Super Shadow is equal in. I don't see why that's applicable, because Super Shadow and Super Sonic have never fought. And the only time when they were together with it, they were on the same side, and it wasn't really notable in that they were keeping up. Otherwise, you're going back into this scenario in which Tails and Knuckles perfectly scale to Super Sonic for helping in Sonic Heroes, which is obviously not true. He's just holding himself back a little bit so that his teammates can keep up with him. Because we all know Sonic is a fucking cocky bastard. So that's also where speed comes in, because speed-wise, Shadow actually has very few feats on his own. Pretty much everything is from scaling to Sonic. I don't remember exactly what they ended up giving Shadow before for Versus Vegeta, which was a stomp, by the way, and I love it. I think they gave him like Mach 10 or something like that. So, if they go with Mach 10 again, then that's what he's dealing with. If they end up finding stuff to go higher, then that works too. Speed ultimately isn't going to come into play too much, but I do know some things on the other side of the spectrum that end up making it matter a bit less. So overall, with this little spiel, what you need to take away from it is that Shadow does not get like the faster than light feats that Sonic has. That's the biggest thing. For durability, in base, again from the Perfect Chaos scaling and Sonic Adventure 2 era Sonic, he is city level. However, in super form, he is invincible. It's actually more like planet level, but in Death Battle, the super forms are always regarded as invincibility. They do accept the no limits fallacy, but whatever, fuck it is, okay. That's how they've been doing it, and they're not going to change that. Now for hacks, in terms of what Shadow can do for skills, a lot of his things are based around time fuckery, teleportation. In super form, he has flight. Super itself is pretty hacks. He has the light speed attack, which actually, it states that it propels him faster than light at light speed. So, I'll give him that one. Though kinetic energy does stop meaning anything when you hit light speed, so it doesn't actually help him in terms of damage. Chaos Boost is basically Kaioken. Very little different from it. And then Chaos Control can be used to teleport things. Come on. Camera's acting up today. Okay. And then he also has some things from the Game Boy Advanced and like fighting games. Mostly like healing and stuff. So ultimately you do have a lot of somewhat hacksy abilities. Mostly the time fuckery is what needs to be worried about the most. In addition, the Chaos Control, which is like teleportation, and he can also, one thing that that is also worth mentioning is that he can do an attack that has a chance of putting someone into a separate dimension, which would be a means of a battlefield removal. And I'm not sure, Death Battle hasn't done one before, but they could. At any point, they could. Like, before last episode, they'd never had anyone ask nicely for a kill, and we got surprised by that one. So now we go over to Mewtwo's stats. Okay, his strength in base is island level. Just from, honestly, the first, 10 minutes of the first movie, he easily destroys, an entire island, and the forces generated by his hurricanes and such like that, they're island level. Then when he gets up into Mewtwo Y is probably what they're going with, given that it has all the feats. As well, we do know, based on the research team so far, that Mewtwo is being decently composited. So it will include feats from, say, the show, the games, manga, Pokken, Mystery Dungeon. I'm really happy that Mystery Dungeon's being included as well, because that series is amazing. I do recommend it to anyone who hasn't played it, even though I'm about to spoil a couple things from it as well. So with Pokken, he's planet level, or low planet level, I think it's just above multi-continent, from the Death Ball attack. However, using Mega Mewtwo Y from Mystery Dungeon, he actually has a feat that is large planet level up to potentially dwarf star level. And that feat is that a being named Dark Matter was pulling the Tree of Life and overpowering it. And what this Tree of Life does is it provides the orbital and rotational force for the planet. So when he's overpowering the Tree of Life, the planet stops. It stops spinning and moving around the sun and just stops in the air. So for Dark Matter to be overpowering the Tree of Life is actually a ridiculously huge feat. And what ends up happening is Rayquaza, Deoxys, and Mewtwo are all pushing the Tree of Life back down from being pulled away. If you split the force that Dark Matter was exerting in three, between the three of them, even though it actually was stated that Mewtwo was doing most of the work, but it's still just done for three because of lowballing. You don't want to over-exaggerate it. Either way, cut into three, it ends up being high-end planet level up to potentially small star level. And that's his psychic strength exclusively, so that's not physical strength. For speed, he has a feat with his attacks. They are Mach 96, which they are scaling from the distance covered from his attacks and such. As well, he easily evades things like Pikachu's lightning, which is stated in the Pokedex to be real lightning. Let's not get back into that Pokemon versus Street Fighter fight. Anyway, but then when he gets into Shadow Mewtwo from Pokken, he has a feat. Now, this is an interesting one because when you look at his Synergy Burst, the Death Ball one, he doesn't actually teleport up into the above the planet. What he's actually doing is he's getting there via speed. How we know this is that his teleport looks drastically different when he's using it in cutscenes and combat. And in the trailer, he was shown to be using that similar means of appearance for his speed in the trailer. So we know that it was actually a time, and what it ended up coming out to was a Mach 12,404 feet, which is pretty nice to play with. For in terms of stats, that's definitely a good feat. I think it's just under sub-relativistic. For durability, he should be at least island level, considering he tanked the island explosion with him on it. But he doesn't scale to his higher feats, because those are through his psychic power, not his physical power. So Newton's laws don't exactly apply there as much. However, his barriers are bolstered by his psychic power, so they do scale to the to his psychic power. And now we go into the notable hacks. His main things are mindfuckery. He can use disable to basically freeze enemies in the air. He can use recover to gain a lot of health back. He can create hurricanes. His barriers, and one thing of note is that his barriers can actually be applied directly to his skin, so that there isn't any chance of something, say, teleporting between the barrier and him. He has an attack called Me First, which I honestly have no idea if this is going to come into play at all, or if it's even going to work, but what Me First does is it makes it so that you interrupt the enemy with their own attack. You use the enemy's attack before they can. So what might end up happening is that you would literally have Mewtwo use something like Chaos Spear or Chaos Control. I don't know if he could, but it's worth mentioning at the very least. If anything, I might be able to say I had told you so if it comes up. So then he has some things like Swift, which are stars that apparently never miss, and I'm pretty sure it was portrayed that way in Charizard versus Greymon. Then you have Teleport, which he does all the time. Dimensional Creation. This one's from both Pokemon Rangers, oddly enough, and Pokken, where one of the arenas was actually created by Shadow Mewtwo. He can actually dump people in those dimensions too, as was stated in Pokemon Rangers. And then we get to the good stuff. These are the 4 abilities that I'm going to say will probably come into play the most. The first one is an attack called Psych Up. In actual competitive play, it doesn't actually get used very much. But here, it's going to be astronomical. What Psych Up does is it makes it so that if an enemy has buffed themselves, you copy those buffs. So let's just say Shadow got 1,000 times stat increase from going super. Okay, well now Mewtwo has that too. And that's on top of whatever buffs he gets from, say, being in Mega Mewtwo Y. So it's a multiplier more than anything else. Then you also have Guard and Power Swap, which are pretty much like Psych Up, except it's offensive and defensive, depending on if you're using Power or Guard Swap, and it actually steals it. It steals the buff. So let's just say Shadow goes Super Shadow and has his invincibility. Mewtwo is fully capable of using Guard Swap to steal that invincibility. And one of the crazy things that's mentioned with Guard Swap is that it doesn't run out the way that super forms would. So basically, if they go this route, and if Mewtwo uses Guard Swap on Super Shadow and it works, then Mewtwo is invulnerable to damage for the rest of the fight. So that's definitely a game changer. The last ability that is worth mentioning is Pressure, and that's actually his ability, not a move. What Pressure does is it makes it so that you're exerting more fatigue, stamina, and focus to use your abilities. This doesn't sound like it would be too major, but we already have Shadow with his, say, inhibitor rings, where it specifically states that he starts to fatigue easily. So when you compound that with Pressure, then it starts to really add up quickly. As well, the, say, minute that Shadow has Super Shadow for, with Pressure, that could very easily be brought down to 30 seconds by doubling the exertion that's required of it. So, really, the way that I see it right now is that Shadow has many, many ways to completely sway this fight in his favor. As well, ultimately, he doesn't really need to, because his stats are actually much, much higher as it is, with large planet level stats above the maybe scaling to Gaia, even though we never fought Gaia, so I don't know. Another theory that someone else has come up with is that with what Shadow Mewtwo was doing, he was actually stealing the what was it, Gaia energy from the Earth. So what's actually kind of hilarious is that is also the terminology used for what powers the Chaos Emeralds. It is Gaia energy from Earth. That's what Unleashed made it very clear it is. So there is the theory that Mewtwo could potentially just straight up steal the friggin' power from the from the Chaos Emeralds, and maybe even go super himself. We don't know. So yeah, it's made obvious by now who I feel like is going to win. I do think Mewtwo is going to win because of a lot of very clear advantages. And that kind of sums everything up. Like, the animation is going to be sprite, so it can only be so good, especially with the Mewtwo sprites that we have access to. Yeah, oh well, though, it should definitely be interesting. And it's probably one of the better debates that we've had in a while, considering the length of this episode already. Sorry, my prediction. So then we have next episode to worry about, which I'm still holding on to the fact that it's James Bond versus Jason Bourne, because what I meant last time was the next 3D fight, and if we're lucky, the fight will be at SGC, which is like a couple days, like maybe a week after this episode comes out. So that'll be interesting to see if they can actually pull that off. And I'm hoping that it's James Bond versus Jason Bourne. Alright, well, until the next time, I will see you then.